Good. Welcome, everybody. My name is Gina. I'm the one of the admissions counselors here at Pacific University. If this is your first session, we are so happy to host you. I apologize for the background noise. I have the lawnmower going on right now, so please excuse the noise. Today's session, we have Denise Giesbers and Lindsey Blum from Orientation and Student Life to come and chat with us here. We are going to have them go ahead and present. Any questions you have, please go ahead and add them in the chat. It does help if you can change your name if it doesn't reflect your name or if it doesn't reflect your student's name. Just in case we're not able to get to your question today, we'll go ahead and make sure to follow up and have the counselor answer your questions via email. But we have found out that we're not quite sure who's asking these questions, especially if you are logging in with your cell phone and it says the name of the cell phone rather than the participant. So we would appreciate that. If you are having trouble changing your name, feel free to just go ahead and leave your name, but if you can just ensure to ask your question following or with the student's name, and so we know who to answer these questions to. And before we get started, in the registration form, there was a little space on there for you to go ahead and ask any questions ahead of time if you'd like them answered. We had one question about financial aid, and we'll go ahead and answer that next week when our financial aid office is actually going to be here. But we did have a recurring question about start date and kind of how that's going to be looking for Pacific. Dean Phillips was able to have a session a couple of weeks ago that kind of addressed all of those questions, and so we'll make sure to get you a link if you haven't been able to see it yet. But I did ask Karen Denston to hop in here and kind of answer some of those general questions as well. So before we get started on the actual orientation and student life presentation, Karen, can I actually have you step in and kind of answer those questions for those families?
Sure, thanks, Gina. Welcome, everybody. Geez, we have a lot of people on here today. That's so exciting for everybody in admissions and at Pacific University. I hope you're doing well and you're hunkered down and eating some good food and spending some good time with your family and getting some things done. At Pacific, we have some task force that are working on reopening the campus and getting ready for all the new students that are coming in for the fall. Right now, we are planning to have face-to-face and the calendar and orientation starting in August. We don't get to necessarily choose if we're going to be allowed to do face-to-face. So you can keep checking in with your admissions counselor. We'll know things in a few more weeks when the state of Oregon and the federal government give us some more information about when we would be allowed to open. If we cannot open for some reason, we are working on different ways to execute the education that we want your students to have and how to keep you involved. None of those decisions have been made yet. So I'm just trying to reassure you that we're working on it. We want to see you here. We want to deliver what Pacific does best, our education face-to-face. We want to have sports in the fall. We want to do everything we can for the winter and spring. That's what we're working on, and we're waiting for more information from the state and from the federal government, as I'm sure all of you are, wherever you're zooming in from in the different states that you're at. So keep in touch with us, and we're going to be keeping in touch with you. We will be as transparent as possible with when we want to get those doors open again. So thanks a lot. Gina, have a great Zoom. I'm sure that it's going to be an awesome one. Everybody's going to learn a lot. Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks, Denise.
Thank you, Karen. We really appreciate you hopping in here. So again, today's session is going to be Denise and Lindsay, and we're going to help answer questions about orientation and student life. I do also want to let you guys know we will have a detailed parent session coming up next month about orientation and more kind of the specifics of what Pacific is going to go through. Today's session is more about the different departments that we have and kind of what their role is and what it's going to look like for orientation just kind of as a general. And so Denise is going to touch base on that. And we also have housing. That's our newest kind of lineup in the series of lunch with the Boxer. And they'll be hopping in next month on the 14th to talk a little bit more about the housing detail. But I will go ahead and have Denise and Lindsey, if you ladies can go ahead and introduce yourself, and then when you're ready, we can go ahead and get your screen presentation started as well.
Thank you so much. Gina, could you add so I can share my screen, please? I wasn't able to do that.
Yes, I will do that while you're introducing yourself. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right, thank you. So welcome everybody, super excited that you're here. My name is Denise Giespers. I am the Director for Orientation, Office Transfer Student Services, Greek Life, and Co-Coordinator of Veteran Services. I have a slide that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes, but I'm also an alum of Pacific, and this is my, actually in just a few days, it will be my 21st year on staff within Student Affairs. Lindsey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsey Blum. I'm serving as the Interim Dean of Students right now. I have spent most of my career in residence life, so working with students who live on campus and campus housing, and part of my career I actually lived on campus. Fun fact is I've lived in every residence hall except for one, which is our brand newest one. And so spent a lot of years working with Denise and collaborating on student life and how we support students at Pacific, and I'm really excited to see you all today.
Awesome. Okay. Lindsey, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So still having difficulties here. I also wanted to tell you that, I'm here today with my office assistant. This is Sparkles. She comes to the office with me every day, but lately she's gotten really good at social distancing when she wants me to play ball with her. And I have found her lately sleeping on the job. She's not answering emails. I just don't know what to do with her. Lindsey. All right, so I want to tell you a little story, a little history here. So up here, right here, these are my parents who attended orientation with me. And the one thing I really remember about that is my dad said, I hope you make a lot of friends. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, well, I hope so too, but why? He's like, well, because there are 36 steps from the bottom to the top of your residence hall, and I hope that they help you move out, because I'm not sure I'm coming back to help you move out. But I also remember watching them drive away and then going to my next sessions and starting to make those connections with my peers and those faculty and other staff members that really became the iconic Pacific family. So then down here on the bottom, this is my youngest son, who made him a staff member 2 years ago. He is amazing at stuffing 1,200 folders. And then the other part that over here on the right, this is my older son. And last year, or in the fall of this year, seems like last year, the fall academic schedule. Anyways, he joined the Boxer family, and now I'm also a family member. And part of the reason I'm telling you all of this is, although I've had quite a long history at Pacific, the nuance of being a family member and going through that experience with my son in the fall was very different. And I've been here a long time. I still had lots of questions. I wasn't sure, like, oh, I've never thought about that. I don't know where to do. But I asked those questions to the admissions counselor and then those other offices there on campus. So there's always a resource. Sometimes you just have to ask more additional questions. Lindsey, do you have anything on that?
I was just going to say that I think part of what's cool is that Denise, having gone through this experience, is going to share some of the tips and tricks that she learned along the way of things, whether your student hopefully ends up at Pacific, but especially as you're considering your whole journey this year with your student, some things to think about. And I think sharing that knowledge is really important. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you. All right. So what happens with orientation? So we're kind of the transition from admissions helping you get here to us helping you know the things to really be successful during those first couple of months as you begin to learn and acclimate to your new community. And we have lots of people to help you along the way. So this is last year's staff of coordinators and program assistants. They work for the 3.5 months to help plan and organize and get things ready for your arrival on campus. And then we have this amazing group of Boxer ambassadors. These are all current students who volunteer their time to help you through the process, answer your questions, walk alongside you as you are going through your orientation process. This is actually at one of our events on Friday evening that we do called Friday Night Lights, and it's become an iconic part of our overall orientation program. All right, so Karen talked a little bit about what to expect and that we don't know, but our plan is that we will be on campus in person. So a few things to note. The orientation dates are August 27th through the 30th for all new students. That is mandatory. We have family orientation on the 27th and 28th. And we do have some early arrival dates for those fall athletes, voyages. We don't have those dates at the moment, but we do on those dates do what we call mini family orientations to give you that information. You are welcome to attend one or the other, both. It's kind of up to you, and we will explain more of that throughout the summer. So what to expect from us? So somewhere in late June, you'll get a welcome on behalf of orientation, introducing who we are, the coordinators for this year, and then we will also have an online newsletter that just has a lot of information about offices and things to think about that maybe you don't know anything about. July, we will introduce the students to their ambassadors, and they will start to be able to ask questions to them. And then in August, we will send you logistical information for your arrival on campus. And then we have orientation, which is a super fun and exciting time. We also, because of what is going on in our current climate, are making plan B, C, and D. The word in orientation every year is adaptability, and we just work to adapt as we go along. So university life and academia can be kind of a world unto its own. There's a lot of verbiage that's used, such as provost. Well, what's a provost? You know, which is like the vice principal, where our president is the president, or the principal, provost, vice principal. So we'll go through some of that information as well. And just ask. That's the biggest thing. Just ask your question, because if you have it, somebody else has had it as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that you can do right now. I'm sure that some of you are chuckling about this picture. We all know, or most of us know anyway, if we wash that red sock with our whites, we're probably going to end up with pink clothing. But many of our incoming students don't know that at this point. And I've had a number of them come to me and like, what did I do? And why am I having to wear all this pink clothes? And I'm like, guess we need to talk about maybe how to do some laundry. So some things that you guys can do, some life skills, and these came directly from current students of things that they wish they had known how to do prior to coming to orientation and to the university. So how to make a doctor's appointment. About a year ago, had my son, I sat beside him and he needed to have a physical. And I said, okay, great. Here's your medical card. Here's the number you need to call. It's all yours. It's your turn to figure this out. I'll sit here beside you to do that. He was not very happy with me. He was just kind of like, are you serious? You're making me do this now? I'm like, yes, because at some point I'm not going to be right there beside you to do it. And I'm going to help model that for you. So some things that's really important, you know, help them figure out their insurance, whether they have the university's insurance or whether they have your insurance, how that works, their cards, banking information, creating and following a budget. One of my students told me that her mother helped her create a binder, and that binder had all sorts of information about phone numbers, health insurance information, codes that she might need. And she's still, after she's been out of college now 4 or 5 years, she still says she goes back to that binder periodically to look at that information. Cooking. This was a great one. She's like, baking a potato, do you wash it first? She's like, I had no clue. And I even find myself once in a while calling my mom, like, you know that recipe that you have? Could you just tell me again how to make that? Because I'm really not sure. So it's great that they can call us, but some of those basic skills on cooking are super helpful. That this is a perfect opportunity for you to help them learn those right now. One of my biology students, I loved this. She's like, you need to tell them not to put their sponges in the sink and that they need to heat them and clean them and not. And I was like, okay, good life skill to learn. Going to let you go ahead and read through the rest of those. Okay, how to prepare your student outside of just life skills. So what are your expectations? How do you want them to communicate with you, work with money? This is a question that comes up very often in orientation. It's like, what should I expect of them? In today's age, it's very different. We have texting, we have video conferencing, so it's easy to communicate. And one of the things that happens is your student gets busy. And if you have a set time on the weekend to communicate with them, just to check in and see how things are going, that oftentimes is much easier than expecting that they're going to be able to respond right away. Because if they're in class and they're texting, that's probably not the best option for them to be paying attention to that instead of paying attention to the faculty member. Some other things that are important is, how to speak for themselves and what they need. That can be uncomfortable for many of our students as they first come in. Who do I ask? It's okay to ask, and we want you to ask. I think everybody at Pacific's always like, we're here for you. And you'll hear that over and over and over again. And we really do mean that. But if they don't know how to ask or what to ask, that can be very difficult. And then we're like trying to pull it out of them, like, hi, how are you? And they're like, I'm doing great, but I have a few questions. Lindsay, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is right now is a good time to get them to practice that, or to even as you're doing your check-ins with your student, when school starts, to ask them if they're having a problem. Okay, who have you talked to about it so far? Who do you think you might be able to talk to? And even just kind of, we call it scaffolding, where you kind of put one step and then you build the next step and the next step after that. And so that's a huge skill set. I think that's one of the main things that people come away from with their college experience, is knowing how to help themselves and navigate systems that they're unfamiliar with. And it does so much to prepare them for how to navigate in the work environment, or as they get older and have their own families and they have families that they have to work with school environments for. So I think just thinking that's lifelong learning, and something that some people it develops naturally and some need those little nudges to keep it going.
Yes. Social media plays a huge part in our students' lives and in our lives, and how we portray ourselves can really make a difference. And sometimes that's hard to remember when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, almost 42 years old, and what you're putting out there to the world. So just remind them that maybe some of those things that they think are fun to put out there for their friends may have some consequences or things that may get looked at later on in life. So that's always a good thing as a reminder. Things they need to take with them to college. This is super important, and things that people tend to forget about. I know myself, I had my son's social security card put in the filing cabinet, and I was reminded, like, oh, you have a job, you need that social security card to fill out your paperwork. Birth certificates, health insurance cards. Those are the top 3 things that students really need to take with them that they don't remember to do. All right, so I'm gonna stop this screen share. So Gina, do you have questions for us? Because I know there are a number of them.
I keep forgetting to turn on my mic. Yes, thank you so much for that. So a couple of questions about orientation and those who are arriving a little bit early has come up. So the first question that we popped up was, what about the early arrival students? Do the parents have to come back for the main orientation, or how does that look like?
Sure. So our early arrival students, depending on the reason that they are arriving, will do a couple of different things. We do some traditional pieces with sign, shake, and ring, getting them into their residence halls. They then meet with their the reason that they have come early. And then the family members go with orientation, and we do a mini orientation, which is kind of a quick nuts and bolts of the bigger orientation. So if you attend a mini orientation with an early arrival, you are not required by any means to come back to the larger orientation. There are a few additional pieces that we do just that are tradition as part of orientation, but you will have the information that you need to be a family member of Pacific. It is not a requirement at all. Many of our students come without a family member. All of the information that we are presenting is online from the different offices. This is just allows you to get more direct information from those offices and those individuals, and those things that we think are important for you to know as a family member as you begin this process as a family member of a new student.
Awesome. So for the students who are coming in early, then are they able to participate in the main orientation, or are they exempt from that because they had a mini one?
So the students themselves participate in all of orientation. They do not have a mini orientation with orientation. They go with their individual programs that have brought them early. We work to extensively work with those programs and getting them connected to the orientation. If for some reason they have, say it's an athlete and they have a practice during one section, we work with those coaches to get them that information when they arrived or during their time they're here before orientation.
Perfect. And during orientation, do you guys ever go over like the public transportation and how to get to and from campus to the airport or maybe outside of campus?
So they will get a folder that has a lot of information in it. And one of those things is a TriMet information. TriMet is our public transportation system here. We also have Net Grove, I think that's what it's called, that is local just to the individual Forest Grove area. And oftentimes when there's questions about that, their individual ambassador will be able to explain that in more detail. And we do briefly go over that information.
Perfect. And then could you explain why a birth certificate is needed versus like a driver's license or some other type of identification?
This really has to do a lot with their work study and the different documentation and pieces that they need to fill out with their paperwork. And it's a requirement that HR or their supervisor that's doing the verification actually has the official paperwork. That's just a requirement by the federal government as we fill out their papers.
So copies are not okay?
Copies are not okay.
We get that a lot. Thank you. And for questions about this goes to, let's see here. Sorry, cars on campus. Is it allowed? How does that look like for a freshman to have their own vehicle? And what's the cost of having the vehicle?
Sure. So your student is not required to have a vehicle, but they are more than welcome to bring one. A couple of things that you might determine: some of our students work off campus for either work study or non-work study positions. That's more, it's a little easier if they're going a distance to have a vehicle. It's some convenience. It costs $50 for the year for a parking permit. We have multiple parking lots around campus. It may mean they don't get to park right beside their residence hall, but there's usually enough parking within the different lots for your student. Lindsay, do you want to talk about our vehicles that they can rent out?
Yeah, So in addition to students being allowed to bring their own vehicles, we also partner with Zipcar. And so we have vehicles that students can use for personal reasons once they create a Zipcar account. So that could be like a short-term rental to do a day trip to Gresham or to Portland or something like that. And then the university also has a motor pool for if the student is organizing something through their club and organization where they can get trained and use university vehicles as part of their student group.
Awesome. Do we guys, do we do any price matching at the bookstore?
Price matching at the bookstore.
Price matching?
Mm-hmm. So for textbooks, if they want to buy their textbooks, I believe Barnes & Noble and Amazon are the two places that they do price matching for textbooks.
So our bookstore is a Barnes & Noble's. And all of that information would be on their website through Pacific's main webpage. You just Google or go onto the search bar and do bookstore. And I do believe they do some price matching. I honestly don't have some of those specific logistics in that, but they are a Barnes & Noble.
Perfect. And then can we talk a little bit about housing? Like how does roommate selection work? And what if it doesn't work out with your roommate and you don't want to live with them anymore?
Lindsay, this is all you.
Okay. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have really great housing web pages. So if you ever have any more detailed questions, I'd just put a plug in right now you can always go there and learn a little bit more about our processes. But an overview is that once you know you want to come to Pacific, or your student knows that they want to come to Pacific, we have housing applications that would be released to students who have deposited starting May 1st. And students would fill out this housing application. It includes some basics about kind of their habits mostly. So are they really clean? Do they like more of a dirty environment? Not dirty, but are they okay with some clutter here and there? Are they night owl? Do they like to get up early? And knowing that their lifestyle might change a little bit when they are out of the house they've been living in for a while. So it's really important that they fill that out themselves and are honest. And then what they do is they have the opportunity to actually match themselves with a roommate, which is something that's really cool about our housing system here at Pacific. Is that we have a database, or our housing management system allows the students to kind of look for people who have some similarities with them. So they could search if they're really find it important to have another night owl living with them. They could search for that and work together to match with that person. Or if they know someone from their high school or from another institution who's coming to the school, they can match with those people too if they're new students. And so once those matches happen, the students don't have to self-select a partner to live with. If they don't, then the housing matches on the criteria that they collect. And then everyone's assigned to rooms across campus. If a roommate match doesn't work out, and that can happen for many different reasons. And it can happen also if you pick your own roommate. It doesn't mean that you're going to be best friends automatically. We know that. We have lots of ways to help students work through that process. So first of all is when you come and move on campus and you meet your roommate and you move in together, we work with the resident assistants who are current students who go through a lot of training and leadership development to actually meet with each roommate pairing and sit down with them and talk about how you want to live together. What are kind of the make or breaks in your room situation? What's really important to you? And so they kind of work together to discuss those things, and they actually create kind of an agreement together on here are our room rules. And so that I think is a big kind of learning situation for students because they might not have had to negotiate these things before. And they might not have roommates forever in their life, but it's also a good way to just kind of build some of those skills of speaking up for yourself and working through some conflicts that you might have. If, after going through that process, things just still are not gelling. Sometimes we have students who have very different schedules once they start at Pacific. So someone who might be getting up really early for swim practice versus someone who stays up very late. that just might not be compatible. We have room change periods periodically through the semester where students don't even need a reason actually to move. They can just kind of raise their hand and find a new room. But outside of those periods, we always work with students. We have professional staff who supervise each building, who can meet with students on top of the RAs who are there to provide support. Sometimes, we find the students just want to talk through the situation and are okay learning to manage it themselves. And sometimes they say, no, I want to live somewhere else. And we work with them to find those good solutions.
Thank you. And we have several more housing questions that popped up, so hopefully you can answer. Most popular one being, can you choose what room or what dorm room you're going to live in? There's a particular room they might have seen or dorm room that they saw on tour and want to request a specific dorm room. How does that work?
Yeah, Gina, you might know more on this than I do. In the current process right now, we really focus on the matching of people. That's our priority. And so I don't believe there is a way to pinpoint or to ask for a specific room. But I would just say all of our rooms are really wonderful. While you might kind of have a love for one hall, I know students who've got assigned to the hall that they hated because it was just their least favorite, and then they loved it. Yes. And so I just encourage students to keep an open mind and also to know that you're going to have friends all across campus. And so you can visit those other halls. You can still use those community spaces if you love the pool table in one hall and your hall has something different. But yeah, to keep an open mind and to know that also you can always do a room change if you really would like to, if that's your number one priority.
Yeah, and just to touch base on that, that does happen every year where students have seen, maybe fell in love with a particular dorm building that they wanted to be in, and just really bummed out that they didn't get into it. And I've checked back on those students like, hey, how's your housing? Did you want to apply for that room change? And they're like, no, actually, I love where I am right now. So to answer that question on the housing application, you can put in a request. Priority is who you live with rather than where you live. The commodity of where you're living with tends to wear down a little bit, and the bigger issue is whether or not you can get along with your roommate. So I know housing puts that as a priority. And so that is going to be the priority, is that you get along with who you're going to be living room with rather than where you're living. So, one more question, I don't know if you can answer this one. When you request single rooms, do you have to have a roommate, and is there gender neutral housing?
Yeah, those are both good questions. So most of our housing for first year students is with one other roommate. There's a couple of exceptions to that. Sometimes there can be a 3-person room here and there. Our buildings are all a little bit unique, and so some have these really large rooms where they can accommodate 3 or 4 people. And also there's always single rooms around. It depends a little bit on the prior class and what they've selected. And we also hold some for students who have accommodations too. But if you're really interested in a single room, that's something that I think you can indicate interest in as well in case they do become available. But the default is that generally you'll have one other roommate. Gender neutral housing, we call gender inclusive housing at Pacific. And students can just indicate that they're interested in that in their housing application. And what that means is that they are open to living with any gender. So it could be someone who shares the same gender identity as them. It could be someone who has a different gender identity as them. And in that, if you select that, you can also indicate if you have a need for a gender neutral bathroom. And so housing takes that into account too. And then in that way, they would similarly match, if you don't find your own roommate, they would match people who are also interested in gender inclusive housing.
Perfect, thank you. And this is another question about the entering fall class. So how large are your typical fall freshmen entering class? And is there any feeling or thought about if that's going to be impacted with the current situation?
So again, Gina, you might know numbers off the top of your head better than I do on this. When we talk about campus housing and students who live on campus with first year students in general, we have a few halls that are kind of more of the first year student halls. So Walter is one of those. About half of Cascade usually goes to that. So, and then sometimes some McCormick and Clark too. And all of those bed spaces together would be about 400 or 500 students potentially. But Gina, you might know that actual number.
Yeah, so essentially housing for our incoming freshman class, our freshman class every year, we're at about a few hundred students, but we also have a significant number of transfer students that come in. We are a very transfer-friendly campus, and so the incoming new fall class that comes in every year, we're a little bit over 400 students, and so that's kind of the typical, I want to say, quote-unquote, class size that comes in. And again, move-in date does vary depending on if they're involved in a sport or voyages. And so not everyone's going to be there all at the same time. So you won't be too overwhelmed. And Denise does an amazing job of putting together an orientation program that makes really everyone feel inclusive. And so please, I know that's always something that a lot of students have a lot of anxiety over. So that's kind of the classroom size here. And then just a quick question about like those accommodations for housing. If there is an accommodation, where do they go to request this type of service?
Yeah, thanks, Gina. So we offer accommodations for students to access learning across campus. And so this could be in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And when we talk about housing, that's outside of the classroom. But the process is actually the same for all students. So what they would do is they would meet with our Office of Accessibility and Accommodations. We call it OAA, if you ever see that acronym. But acronyms are all over the place at all institutions, so I try to say the full name. But they're a wonderful office, and they talk with the students about their needs. They are the office that would collect the paperwork for documentation about accessibility needs, and then they would work with the student and housing to work on that accommodation. So if you have a certain health condition that needs a certain kind of room or a feature within a room, that would be the office that you would work with. And they are wonderful. They actually are having office hours for both current families and prospective families. If you ever want to talk with them, you can email them to set up an appointment to even just start that conversation now if you're interested.
Something else on that we get asked a lot during orientation is my student has had accommodations in the past, but they don't think they need them now. That's totally fine, but we do recommend that they go ahead and fill out the paperwork and get the documentation, because sometimes as they go throughout the semester, they realize, actually, maybe I really do need some of those accommodations. And then they're having to wait a little bit of time to get all the paperwork and documentation in. So we highly recommend that they go ahead and do that documentation, fill out the paperwork, and they can choose whether or not they want to use their accommodations and when to put those into place.
Are there certain documentations required for orientation?
We will send out any communication of information that we need back from you. Oftentimes you're going to already have submitted that information either through admissions or when you do your registration and advising, because we work collaboratively with all the different offices on campus. So I kind of say it's like a big game of Tetris to fit all of the information in that you guys are going to need for orientation, and everybody's working together to make it a successful time for you to transition into academia life.
Awesome. And this, I think, is a great question for you, Denise, as well. Greek life was mentioned earlier. What is that like at campus?
So Greek life at Pacific, and I say Greek life at Pacific because it is very different here. We're all local chapters. We are not national chapters. And so that has a different flavor. We currently have 5 groups. All of them have gender inclusivity statements. So we have some more traditional type sororities, and we have a fraternity that is co-ed. But Greek life at Pacific is really thriving. They do a lot of philanthropic work and community service. And interestingly enough, their overall cumulative GPA is very high, which is awesome. I think it is at a 3.3 as an entire Greek system. I'm super proud of that. I've been involved with Greek life as an advisor to one of the sororities. This is my 20th year, and became the overall Greek life advisor, I don't know, about 3 years ago. So it's really great to have seen the transition over many years. It is not what everybody thinks of when you see the movies. That's just not our system at Pacific, and we're super proud of all of those students. They have pillars, academic, they have philanthropy, community service. So they really have a wide variety of things that they are very passionate about.
Awesome. And we are kind of slowing down on questions here, but there was one that did pop up, and I think it's more of a confusion about the orientation and parent orientation. So Denise, if you can go over one more time about the differences between May orientation and early orientation for students and parents. And if I think one of the confusion was if we drop them off early, do we have to stay the 2 weeks for the main orientation? So if you can kind of touch base on that one more time.
Sure. If your student comes for an early arrival, typically those early arrivals are athletics and voyages. Those are our primary early arrivals. When you come, we will offer a family orientation. It's much smaller in length, but it covers the same information. You do not need to stay the 2 weeks. You are welcome to return and do the 2-day orientation alongside your student. I will tell you, there are touch points throughout the main orientation of those 4 days where you're there for 2 that you will have contact with your student. But your student, once they arrive to campus, there are things they need to learn and to do, and they're going to class already. So don't expect to spend a lot of time with your student. And that's something that I was going to touch on briefly. It's super hard sometimes to remember all those things you want to tell them. So have those conversations before you get to campus. It can be an emotional time. It's an exciting time. And it's very quick, and there's a lot of information thrown at you during orientation. So it's easy to kind of forget some of those things that you wanted to tell them, including how proud and excited you are that they're starting this journey. So those are a couple of things to think about as you get ready to come to orientation to drop off your student. But you are not required to be at any of the orientations. Like I said, all of that information is on our website in the different offices. This is just one place that you can get all of that information in a succinct order that we have found helps our family members help their students be successful.
So thank you. And I know I can see in the chat room that there are a few questions about scholarships and deferring. And we'll go ahead and make sure that your counselor does talk to you about those scholarships and how to defer if you need to, and what exactly is deferment. Or next week, if you want to come in next week, it'll be super helpful when our financial aid director and Cassie Copeland, who also is a financial aid advisor, will come and be able to answer those questions. So I'm going to just kind of hang off on asking Denise or Lindsay to answer those questions. Our last 2 questions here that we have is, do we have separate Greek housing, and how does that work, and how do they apply for Greek housing? And this is a separate one. Can you discuss the meal plan? So I guess let's kind of backpedal. I apologize. Can you talk about Greek housing, Denise?
Sure. We do not have Greek housing at Pacific. We do not have houses. That is a very different model than what we have at Pacific. So no, your students, typically their 2nd and 3rd year after they've joined, they oftentimes ask to be roommates with each other somewhere on campus, but there are no houses.
Perfect, thank you. And then the last questions here is, how do the meal plans work, and what are the types of resources that students have access to? What are some popular resources on campus and off campus?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So meal plans, this is like one of my favorite topics right now, because we switched meal providers this year, and everyone I know is in love with the food that we have on campus. And so meal plans are pretty flexible for students. So generally we have 4 different kinds where there's different ratios of kind of the all-you-can-eat meals and then the dining dollars that they can use. Some students love to have access to as many all-you-can-eat meals as possible, and I think kind of the stereotype is like athletes who are expending lots of calories like those options, but I know lots of other students who do too. And then they have fewer dining dollars to use in certain locations. So with the all-you-can-eat meals, it's open in our dining hall where you come in, you kind of swipe your card, and then there are so many options to choose from every day. Our new dining provider, it's not a big corporation where they have corporate recipes like they are at some schools. They have a head chef who designs the menu every single week. And while they bring back the popular options, and there's some traditions kind of building up the more that they're on campus, there's so much variety, and it really introduces students to new foods that maybe they haven't had before, but also incorporating some of those comfort foods that make it feel like home. So there's salad bar, there's soups, there is a beautiful pizza oven where they hand make pizza every day. There's a grill, and then usually a few other options. Like we have poke some days, and we have really beautiful like casseroles some days, and lots of variety and lots of different food types. So that is for the all-you-can-eat meals. They just swipe and they can come in as many times as they want while they're in the dining hall to fill up their plate if they're still hungry. But then also the dining dollars are really helpful because we have 2 locations where students can use those. One is our campus Starbucks, which I know all of the staff really appreciate having, but the students love it there too. Students use that place to study and to hang out with friends, and also to grab quick drinks and quick bites to eat. There's breakfast sandwiches they can get all day. There's sandwiches they can get all day and salads. But then we also have like a little market where students can pick up kind of a warm meal that's on the buffet, or they can get cold sandwiches, they can get sodas and drinks and candy and snacks. And so you can pay out of pocket for those too if they've used up their declining dollars also. But really flexible for students. You know, we're not, as a small school, we don't have 5 different locations for them to go, but I think in the one location where we have, there's so many options. Students, I think, are a lot happier with the selection than maybe in years past, and really good, nutritious, local, lots of organic food, and our dining staff's just amazing. So I call it my favorite restaurant, First Grove.
Yeah, one of our colleagues eats there almost 3 or 4 times a week, if not every day, because the food is actually good and there's variety, and there are dietary options as well too. So one of the questions was, are there tons of vegetarian and vegan options? I know oftentimes they're kind of vegetarians are put off to the salad bar and that's it. So any better options, I guess, for
every single location actually has a vegetarian option in it, and usually it's vegan too. So it's not like, oh, here's my one place. It's at every single station there's an option.
Awesome. And this is a question that I actually get as an admissions counselor in the summertime. So with the dining plan, when does it start? Does that, especially for students who are coming in early, does the dining start then? And does the price change, or like during orientation, if dining doesn't happen, or is there going to be food at orientation? That's another question that we get a lot.
Yeah, Denise, do you want to take that?
Sure. So when your student arrives, depending on how they arrive, so if they arrive for an early arrival, the group that has brought them there takes care of those meals and figuring out when they'll eat. And they will communicate with all of them. Once orientation starts, we provide all their food. We know this is one of the main concerns students and family members always have, is how is my student going to get fed? We understand, we've got you covered. The meal plan technically starts on Saturday of orientation, and we've built that into the orientation program to help them learn also how to go about utilizing the services in the main food area. A couple of things that you might consider. The dining dollars do not start until that Saturday. And so if they are wanting to go to Starbucks or off campus, or they just want some snacks, that's not included. So you may want to give them some additional money to get some of those snack type foods that wouldn't be provided prior to their meal plan starting. But there is plenty of food. We work very hard and diligent with our food service provider to always have different options, vegetarian, vegan, for all of our students and our family members throughout orientation and the early arrival time frame. Was there anything else on that you wanted me to touch base on?
No, I think that was it. Just kind of the early arrivals. How does dining work in orientation, and how does food work there? So thank you. And one quick question was, can they take food back to the dorm? And that quick answer is yes, you can. We also have to take out deposit containers. I think it's $5 or $10 for this to-go container that you can take on, and basically you get an empty tray. You'll go into the all-you-can-eat, fill up, and then you can take it to the common room with your friends and have lunch there away from the dining hall or at your room. So yes, you can absolutely take your food out of the dorm room. And so any other questions about housing and kind of the more detailed question? Again, we will have housing come in and join us in a few weeks to answer those questions. So if we weren't able to get to your question today, I do apologize, but we will have Lisa Aiello from housing come in and talk to us there. Thank you so much, Denise and Lindsay, for taking the time to answer these questions. I know a lot of the questions helped families and kind of get some of those kind of anxiety levels down a little bit. And so we just wanted to ensure that you were able to kind of put a face to a name, and so when they see you on campus, they know that they can go and talk to you. Very much appreciate it. Again, to all of our families, next week it's going to be financial aid that's going to be hopping on and answering those questions. The following week, we will have Mike Schinkel from Advising and Registration, and he's going to go over how that's going to happen. And there's also going to be, like I said, housing popping in, and we'll have a couple of different departments hopping on as well, too. So thank you again. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen while we are kind of closing out this session. And if you guys wanted to take a look, we started our podcast. We're actually very excited about this. Again, any questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll make sure they get answered to you individually. We have a Twitter page, Instagram, and Facebook page, and we're very, very excited to announce the podcast that we have. And so please follow and rate and review, and go ahead and you can direct your questions at any of these social media pages if you'd like, and we'll get those answered. These are monitored by actual admissions counselors and our director of communications as well, who is also partly an admissions counselor. So we are here to help you. Thank you one more time, Lindsay and Denise, for helping, and have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.